Hello, I'm going to reword the interaction on page 92, which is the initial interaction between provider A and provider B. Provider A is a senior ranking provider, and provider B is a junior ranking. They're having some disagreements on intubation with the patient, whether to move them to ICU, um, and the measures that they're going to take to do it. I'll just go ahead and read over interaction one. Provider A says, she needs to be intubated, then we'll move her to the ICU. Provider B, she needs to be in the ICU. That's policy. Provider A, we've got respiratory techs, a nurse, and me there. We don't need anything else except the intubation supplies and the ambu bag. Provider B, I don't agree. They have they have better monitoring equipment and are set up to do this routinely. We're not. That that way she can just go right on the ventilator instead of us bagging her till we get there. She's breathing, her blood pressure and pulse are fine, and it's less than 5 minutes from here to the ICU. Let's move her instead of wasting time discussing it. This is not open for discussion. I've got my license, so we're doing it my way. Well, you may have your license, but I'm taking the patient. Provider B unplugs the oxygen from the wall and connects it to a portable tank, and then unplugs the bed and pushes it up to the floor and down the hall, with provider A and the rest of the team following. And then they have a note at the end. Note: the patient was successfully intubated 5 minutes later in the ITU without sequela. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that word. Provider B was fired for not allowing providers A's order. Providers B was sued. Provider B sued the hospital for wrongful termination. I believe the situation could have been totally different. Um, if they had used their interprofessional communication. All this is for the benefit of the patient, arguing what is right, what is wrong, you know, especially in front of the patient is never a right thing to do, whether the patient is unconscious, whether the patient is alert. It's never the right thing to do in front of a patient. Um, this could have been handled a totally different situation, coming together with recommendations instead of delegations. Of course, they knew that provider A was a senior resident and that provider B was a junior resident, but it still is a team, and whether it's a higher profession or a lower profession, you should be allowed to make recommendations. That recommendation may not follow through, but you should still be allowed. I would have honestly rewarded it, just the same as it was in the enhanced interpersonal communication on page 96. Provider A goes on to say, I understand that its policy it's not I understand that the hospital's policy is not to intubate on the floor unless it's a cardiac or respiratory arrest. But I don't want to take the chance that she arrests along the way. Then we've got a code in the elevator or in the hall. I share your concern, says provider B. But if she has a cardiac arrest during the tubing, we've got the same problem in the room. Provider A then says she's not going to arrest during the tubing. Provider B says, let's do this. Let's call the house supervisor to get a third opinion, which, is always a good thing. Each provider in this interaction, they stated their recommendation. They weren't able to come to an agreement, so they had somebody higher up step in, which is always good to keep the situation, leveled, and have somebody else, to have a different perspective on the situation. And it says we could have we could be done we could be done already, but I guess another few minutes hopefully won't matter. Then the supervisor comes in and says, I think you both make some really good points, and I can understand each of your positions. How about if we hold the elevator and we all go together? Provider A says, I know you want to follow policy, and I still think we could intubate her first, but let's move her and hope for the best. I just don't want to get her tubed on the ventilator. Um, and then provider B says, sounds great to me. And the supervisor says, thanks, I've got some help gathered up, and we'll do this right now and get her upstairs and tubed. This interaction was so much better than the first interaction. It allowed both providers to state a recommendation, although they were not a they didn't come to an agreement. They had a supervisor step in to give the final call, to say what was going to happen. Even though they still felt hesitant, everything was carried out successfully, and ultimately, no one was fired. The patient was able to get from point A to point B without being tubed. And, everything is for the benefit of the patient, and this interaction was so much better. Thank you.